Welcome to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast, powered by StatRoute.com. And now, here's your host, Ryan Skullroot.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Ryan Skullroot, and we have an interesting show for you today. We are talking NFL Cut Day. We've got some trades that have been going on, or at least one major one that's been going on, especially kind of big for my hometown team. So we're going to talk a little bit of news, kind of the biggest stories that have been coming out of today. This is going to be a somewhat short broadcast. So some of the biggest things that have come out today, and then we'll actually open it up. If you guys want to go ahead and put into the comments underneath during the live broadcast, I will be monitoring those as well. If you guys want to comment or any questions you have about the fantasy season this year and such, I will be free to answer those for a few minutes after we kind of go through the stories. So if you guys want to go ahead and put in your requests, your questions that you have about certain players, possible trades, let me know. Put those in there, and we will cover those. A couple little announcements again. If you're still looking for a little last-minute advice for your fantasy football drafts, we still have our draft guide is still up. You can get the PDF for $5 at SkullKingFootball.com and go to the store tab, and it should be right there. I believe it's the first option. So get that. You can also check our rankings, fantasy rankings. A lot of us have updated those in the last couple days. Obviously, they're going to need to be updated today a little bit more with some of the news that's come out, which we will get into in just a minute. And so there's that. And we just wanted to say that we are really happy that this year we are going to be doing a lot more DFS work. We are working with some partnerships in terms of some DFS advice. So be looking out for that as we get ready for the season. I am just really, for the most part, jumping into the DFS space, for the most part, again, being from the Seattle area and Washington not allowing fantasy sports. We have found a couple ways to be able to still do it for free that doesn't break any laws. And so I will be getting a little bit into the DFS space and trying to help out in that area throughout this season as much as possible as well. So for those of you who are involved, whether in DFS, Dynasty, Redraft, we are doing everything we can to be able to cover it all for you guys so you guys get the information you need from us. So I don't think there's anything else. I think that's it for that. So why don't we go ahead and hop into the news stories of the day.
Today's headlines.
All right, so we're going to start off again, being a Seattle guy, we're going to start off with the big Seattle news. Right here, the first story, Jadaveon Clowney has been traded to the Seahawks. The Seahawks gave up a third-round pick, as well as linebackers Barkevious Mingo and Jacob Martin. Both those linebackers had basically been more just simply pass rushers. That's basically all they were doing anymore. And so they were pretty much expendable. Both of them were possibly on the chopping block in terms of cuts today. So what this does for the Seahawks is this provides Seahawks with a very formidable front seven. If you look at what they have now, you're giving Jadaveon Clowney to Ziggy Ansah if he can get healthy and stay healthy. LJ Collier, who they just drafted in the first round, again, once he's healthy. Jerron Reed, once he's back from a 6-game suspension. I know there's a lot of ifs going in, and once this happens, I know there's a lot going on in terms of this offense. You know, Poona Ford, who's been a phenomenal run stopper up the middle all preseason, and really, really coming into his own after being undrafted a couple years ago. And then you've got the linebacker core of Kendricks, Bobby Wagner, and KJ Wright, with some of the young guys, Cody Burton, Ben Burkervin, guys that they have drafted really put together a solid front seven. And people may argue this with me and disagree with me, but I think that because of how good the front seven was in the 2012, 2013, 2014 era for the Seattle Seahawks, that's what made the LOB so good. This may come off as controversial, but the reason those guys were so good in the defensive backfield is because of the front seven's ability to get to the quarterback, to shut down run lanes, and force teams to throw quickly because of the pass rush. That's what made the Legion of Boom so good. They were great at coverage, great at ball hawking, great at hitting and getting up and making tackles when they needed to in the run game. I'm not taking that away from them. But part of their success was because of the front seven. And I think that can help a young defensive backfield when you've got Shaquille Griffin at corner, Trey Flowers at corner. We're still a little unsure about what's going on in the safety position. We're still looking at what cuts are actually going to happen and who's getting starting positions there. But as far as a fantasy perspective goes, the Seattle defense is moving up. I'm definitely going to be moving them up in my rankings. I think I had them at like around 12, 14 overall in terms of defense. I'm definitely pushing them up at this point in my rankings. I'm not necessarily going to top 5, but 6 to 8 in that range. I think that definitely moves them up to that overall right now. Willing to draft them again. I'm not going too far in drafting defenses. There's still defense is still going to be one of my last 2 picks in a fantasy draft, depending on how deep the draft is. So I'm very as a Seahawks fan, I'm very happy, and as a fantasy football analyst, I think this really helps out what that defense is going to be able to do, and makes them more than just a streaming option, which is really all they were last year. They were just a streaming option last year. So seeing what they can do now with if everyone's healthy and the way that they can kind of move people around, I really think that this will help out the Seattle defense and make them a little bit more of a formidable force, especially in fantasy. So that's the big news off the top today. So moving on to our second story. LeSean McCoy has officially been released by the Buffalo Bills. Last year he finished 514 yards, 3 touchdowns, only 238 receiving yards. Has really gone down overall in production over the last couple years. You look at what the Bills did in drafting Devin Singletary, bringing him in. They drafted him, I believe, in the 3rd round, 74th, 75th overall. The writing was kind of on the wall once we got to the draft, to be completely honest. Once they drafted him, he's very much that same type that LeSean McCoy is. And then you look at what they've done with him in the preseason. It's been a lot of pass catching, running here and there, catching the ball out of the backfield. He's been all over the place. Devin Singletary has. And is shown to be very productive. We have been advocating for guys to draft, in your fantasy drafts, to draft Devin Singletary. I've seen him go in the 7th and 8th rounds. Well, if you're still haven't had your draft yet, which in many cases, a lot of cases is a very, very good thing, he's going to be moving up draft boards. I could see him going in the 5th round, 6th round. Now, some people still may think, well, that's way too high because it's the Bills and they're going to be a crappy team. Very well could be, but looking at the upside of Devin Singletary and what he can do, I think he's going to provide a great weapon for Josh Allen to throw to out of the backfield. I like his measurables. We loved him coming out of FAU when we were covering the draft earlier in the year in March, April, and May. So I think that this is a great move for the Bills. I saw this coming. We've said this before that McCoy was very likely going to be a cap hit and a possible cut. As far as McCoy goes in fantasy, I'm not necessarily, if you drafted him late, I mean, he's going extremely late, like 120, pick 120 in drafts. If you have him, I would not necessarily drop him yet. I would wait to see where he goes. Unless you're absolutely strapped and you drafted, maybe a Melvin Gordon, and this is not exactly what you're looking for. You're wanting a little more stability, trying to find someone else maybe on the waiver wire. In that case, yeah, perhaps, go ahead and drop him. But for now, I think you should hold on to him just to see what happens over the next little bit. So he could get picked up by, possibly in Miami. I don't think so, but he could get picked up by a Miami. You're looking at Houston. Obviously, we still don't know what's going on with that running back situation. Let's see who else is having issues with their. Or Tampa Bay could be a possible opening there. I know that a lot of people are pushing up. Was it Dare Obangawale? I picked him up in the SkullKing Listener League draft myself. I think I was in like the 15th or 16th round when I got him. So, I like LeSean McCoy to still have a role somewhere, depending on who picks him up. So don't necessarily drop him off your rosters yet. If you did draft him, you have a deep draft, or if you're in Dynasty and you have him on your teams, I wouldn't necessarily drop him yet. Wait to see how this plays out. So to go along with LeSean McCoy, we've been talking about Devin Singletary and what's been going on. There was a here's a quick thing that's just come up. Going back to LeSean McCoy, just saw this pop up on SleeperBot. There's a news story coming out that says that the Chargers are a potential landing spot for LeSean McCoy. Makes a ton of sense considering Melvin Gordon's holdout and head coach Anthony Lynn was the Bills' offensive coordinator in 2016 when McCoy ran for 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns. Very interesting there. That would really knock the wind out of the sails for Justin Jackson owners. Maybe not so much for Austin Eckler owners. Here, let's bring this back here. So definitely an interesting take on what's going on there. That again, this is why you don't necessarily want to drop him. So watch out for what's maybe going on there. Interesting that the Chargers are looking at LeSean McCoy. I think if that happens, they still could be trying to negotiate with Melvin Gordon, or could just try to move on and trade him away. So again, more things to watch for. All right, so let's get back to Devin Singletary. The GM for the Bills, Brandon Beane, has said that we just felt right now that Devin would be able to help us along with the other guys that we're keeping. And they've got Frank Gore right now. I think that TJ Yeldon is still on the team. I have not seen whether or not he has been cut yet, but I think that this opens the door for Yeldon to stay with the team. We do see this as a running back by committee. That's what all fantasy football players absolutely hate to hear, especially when something like this happens, where the star running back is gone, and the rookie looks to be taking on a prominent role. For me, I still think that Devin Singletary is the only running back to own in the Bills' backfield. I see him taking on bigger roles as the season goes on. I think that they drafted him to be the next LeSean McCoy. That's what they got him for. And again, picked him in the 3rd round. Used some good draft capital in order to get him. So for me, Devin Singletary is the guy to own. I've seen a question on one of the fantasy football chat rooms that I am in, Devin Singletary or Matt Breida. I'm still going Devin Singletary. I was already still on Devin Singletary because of this possibility before the news broke out. Neither team is probably going to be very good this year, but Devin Singletary has a lot less in his way for prominent snaps. Breida is still dealing with the fact that Tevin Coleman is still there, and Tevin Coleman was Shanahan's pass catching pet back in Atlanta. He loved using him out of the backfield catching the balls. So for me, it's still a Devin Singletary backfield, to be completely honest. So that's where I am going with this, and kind of my thoughts on Devin Singletary. Even though that they're saying that this is a running back by committee issue, I'm not buying that. I think that this is Devin Singletary's backfield, to be completely honest. He's going to come off probably in short yardage situations for a guy like Frank Gore. Frank Gore's still going to get carries, but Devin Singletary is the guy to own in the Buffalo backfield. So the last big story that we're covering, sources have apparently told ESPN that talks between Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott are intensifying, aiming to wrap up a deal this weekend. So make sure to keep an eye on this. If you have Tony Pollard but don't have Ezekiel Elliott, like I do, Tony Pollard is still a hold again for now. Talks could cool off. So again, definitely something to watch. So I personally think that even if Ezekiel Elliott does sign, it's possible that Tony Pollard will still get the majority of the snaps this first week. I'm not so sure that I understand that Ezekiel Elliott has been working out, has been staying, fit and in shape and ready to go for the season once he comes back. I personally am still just a little bit hesitant on how much work they would give him, considering he hasn't been in the offense all that much, or hasn't been in the offense and in practices to really develop that chemistry. But it is Ezekiel Elliott, so they may kind of hold back on him a little bit, maybe go 50-50. So I think Pollard moves of less of a running back 2 role that he could have had. I think he would have been a running back 2 type of guy in the offense if Ezekiel Elliott didn't sign. If Ezekiel Elliott signs, I think that he's more of a possible flex play in deeper leagues. So 12, 14, 16, I think he's a possible flex play still. If Ezekiel Elliott signs, we're still waiting to see. All we know is that talks have apparently intensified, and Zeke could sign. For those of you who took the shot on drafting Ezekiel Elliott, knowing that the Cowboys would probably end up signing him anyways, awesome. That's a great gamble to take. I don't disapprove of the take. I was telling people I wasn't against drafting Ezekiel Elliott. If you were going to do it, though, make sure you drafted Tony Pollard just in case. It'll be interesting to see how the numbers work out and if they're just going to throw away his next 2 seasons or if they're going to keep him at the lower pay the next 2 seasons and then it takes effect in, was it 2021? So we'll see with how that goes. So that is our major stories. I wanted to go over just a few more little things. People who have been cut, making news, making headlines. The Eagles have waived running back Josh Adams. He ran for 511 yards and 3 touchdowns last year, but it's a very crowded backfield since the Eagles acquired Jordan Howard through a trade. They drafted Miles Sanders. There's not a whole lot of room for Josh Adams. He could still end up somewhere that could give him a little bit of a role, whether that be Tampa Bay or Houston. There are some teams that need better running back help. So, again, he's a name to kind of keep your eye on the waiver wires. I know no one was really drafting him because he wasn't in a great situation anymore in Philly. So that's something to watch for. The Redskins, looks like they're moving on from former first-round wide receiver Josh Doxson. They're working hard, apparently, to trade him, but if they can't, they're expected to release him. At this point, I don't see anyone trading for Josh Doxson. I liked him coming out into the draft in 2017, I believe, is when he was drafted. Or maybe it was 2016. It might have been 2016. So I kind of liked him coming out in the draft. Still waiting to see. Aaron Kagan, one of our QB writers, has just commented here. Alex Barnes has been dropped. I believe he was with Tennessee. So they're making some of their cuts. Vikings Laquan Treadwell has also, or at this point is most likely being cut again. Another team working to trade a former first-round pick that just didn't seem to work out. Treadwell was one of those guys I didn't really like coming into the draft, coming out of college. There were just a lot of red flags, and not necessarily off the field things, but just watching kind of the way that he played. His 40 time was terrible. His movement in and out of breaks wasn't all that good. He played in a spread offense system that he was able to take advantage of, lesser talented defenses. And so that was just a pick that I didn't necessarily like. And so there's that. Looking at some other things, the Patriots have chosen Jarrett Stidham, the rookie out of Auburn, as their backup quarterback and released Brian Hoyer. The Redskins have released a former fourth-round pick, running back Samaje Perine. Looks like they're satisfied to stay with Darius Geis, Adrian Peterson, and Bryce Love, who at this point is probably going to redshirt, to be completely honest, looking at where he's at. And that's at least the possibility as of this point right now. So I think that is it. Like I said, I wanted to make sure we got to kind of these stories out and talked about them. Like I said, a little bit of a short show, but we wanted to make sure we got some of these things going. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to the SkullKing Fantasy Football Podcast. We're moving into week 1. Looking forward to our shows coming up this next week. We will make sure to look at, after all these cuts have happened and we see kind of who signs where, we will make sure to get a waiver wire show going into next week. And get that taken care of. We will make sure to do that. We will look at we're going to start again, like I said, a DFS show. Probably it's going to be a Saturday. We'll mainly be looking at main slates for Yahoo, DraftKings, possibly FanDuel. I prefer DraftKings and Yahoo. That's just kind of my personal preference with the platforms and how they're set up. So we will be looking at those types of things. Really looking forward to this season, guys. Season starts Thursday. Can't wait to really work through this season with you guys. For those of you who still have fantasy football drafts coming up, trust your research, trust yourself. Don't be afraid to pivot when you need to. And good luck with your drafts. Good luck this fantasy season, guys, and we will talk to you later.
Hey, SkullKing Nation. Thank you for listening to the SkullKing Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.